everybody. I would like to introduce to you Hinduism for this lesson plan. So to begin, I'm going to go ahead and enter into Canvas and go to the module on Hinduism. And Hinduism is our first religion we're studying for this class. It is one of the more significant Eastern religions in the terms that it predates the other Eastern religions. The other Eastern religions oftentimes pull from Hinduism in terms of concepts and ideas, terminology, and so forth. So Hinduism is going to be a large religion to tackle for us. It's going to cover like 5,000 years of history, and I have only 30-minute Zoom presentation to do that. So I'm going to focus on the highlights. Okay, let me share the screen here, and let me pop you over to the modules. And here we are, the Hindu traditions. Now, Hinduism is the name of this religion, but that's really kind of a term that the British came up with in the 18th century. Yes, the word Hindu predates the British, but calling it as an ism and one distinct religion called Hinduism is how the British were able to explain the wide variety of Hindu traditions that they saw. So Hinduism as an ism is really a more modern British term. The word Hindu, however, was when the Greeks and Persians came into India and they saw people living near the Indus River in India, which is one of the large rivers in India, and they referred to them as the Sindhus or the Hindus. And so from that, we get that term there. The Hindus themselves used to refer to the tradition as Santana Dharma. Santana Dharma is mentioned in your reading, and it refers to the eternal way, or the Santana is the eternal, and Dharma is duty or the way to live your life. So the eternal way to live your life. So moving down here to give you some of the terminology I just did, let's move into looking at now some of the history and how India plays itself out in the course of 5,000 years. So we're going to talk about 6 different time periods. Here we go. Here are the 6. The first one is the Indus Valley Civilization. This is the farthest back we can go in Indian history. This is the original indigenous people of India before anybody necessarily came in and migrated into India. Yes, we all eventually migrated somewhere. I don't mean that, but in terms of this is as far back we go to the original people of India. And then we have a second period, and this is a period where we do have people coming in outside of Indian land into Indian soil and mixing in with the original people, possibly. We don't know if there was a warfare. We don't know if it was a peaceful takeover. We don't know because it's so far back in history if you look at these dates here. But it was called the Aryan period, when the Aryans are the translated as kind of the nomadic warriors or the noble ones, and they are those that come in from what's called Indo-Europeans. They come in from Persia and other locations in Syria, Siberia and so forth, and they enter into Indian soil. And with it, they bring their language, they bring their philosophy, they bring their understanding of gods and goddesses, and directly impacts India, becomes part of Indian history. And then we have a time period called the Jain and Buddhist or Upanishad period. It was about 2,500 years ago. And this is a big transformation in Indian philosophy at that time. We have a tendency to focus on mysticism and meditation and moving beyond gods and goddesses, and the concept of a guru and a teacher, and all of that is coming into play there. We have classical Hinduism, which is about, if I did a rough estimate, about 2,000 years ago, where a lot of things that you know India today, the philosophy of India today, kind of comes from this time period. You might hear of terms like, or gods and goddesses like Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, Kali, Durga, some of the famous gods and goddesses, and that comes out of that time period of classical Hinduism. We also have some of the famous literature coming from that time period. For instance, we have the Bhagavad Gita coming from that time period. Then we have a period called the medieval period, and some major philosophy coming out of that time period, and then our modern period up into today. And that's when you would be talking about, for instance, the British in control of India and Gandhi's efforts to release it from British control, and some of the more modern movements that came out of that time period. Okay, let's just go through each of those a little more slowly and talk about the major advancements that were made in each of those time periods. So here we have the Indus Valley Civilization, sometimes referred to as the IVC for short. And what happened was in the 1920s, archaeologists unearthed some cities in northern India called Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. They were literally buried under the ground, and they discovered these cities. And when they discovered them, they found evidence of a very advanced civilization that existed thousands and thousands of years ago. If you look at the dates up here, it's about 4,000, 4,500 years ago. And what they discovered when they unearthed these cities was evidence of a language. We have not yet deciphered that language. We have evidence that they were a very spiritual people. They had little figurines that were positioned in meditation posture and lotus position. They had the mother goddess, because we see the female position, the female attributes being portrayed in some of the figurines. And they had evidence of what's called phallic symbols representing fertility. And we still have that in India today. We have the phallic symbols called the Shiva Lingam. We have the mother goddess still today, playing a big role. We have yogis meditating still today. So a lot of the influences from the Indus Valley are still in India today. And I did skip this one, so let's cover that real quick. The advancements, this was a fairly advanced cities at that time. They had bathing facilities. They were ritualistic bathing facilities, and that concept of bathing in the Ganges River is still with us today. They had advanced plumbing. If you are reading the material there in the lesson plan, it will probably discuss how they had like their own form of air conditioning where they opened up, they had the windows facing the wind a certain way. So they were quite advanced, quite sophisticated people, the original people, as far back as we can go in Indian history to the Indus Valley civilization. And a lot of their ideas are part of India today. Okay, so that time period was quite significant. If you look at the dates here, it's quite a long time ago. But then we get the second period, and the second period is called the Aryan or Vedic period. And this is the period right here about 3,500 years ago up into 2,500 years ago. And so the Aryan or Vedic period is when these Aryans or noble ones, that's how it translates, come into India, and with it they bring their language, they bring their separation in society or their caste system, they bring their whole sense of philosophy, the concepts of their gods and goddesses, all of that enters into India through the Aryans. And so what language do they speak? They spoke Sanskrit. It's very similar to Greek and Latin. Greek and Latin have lots of common words that they share with Sanskrit. For instance, the word for horse is the same, the word for God, for mother. I mean, so we definitely see a common connection there. They brought within their caste system, and caste translates, the Sanskrit word for caste is varna, which means a system of color. And so some people speculate, and again, we don't have evidence 100%, but some people speculate that when they set up the caste system, they based it on a color system, and the darker indigenous people of India would be lower in the caste, and then the Aryans would be higher up in the caste. So we don't know if that's true, but the reason why that was speculated is the actual term for caste is a system of color. And in India, the caste system has been around for thousands of years. It's still part of India today. I don't want to deny that, but legally it's not supposed to be part of, in terms of who you hire for your job, or in terms of, scholarships for school or who gets into university. They're not supposed to be looking at caste, but that's been a more modern movement to move away from caste, but certainly caste is part of the Indian thinking still today. So we have the four major castes. We have, and some people call it the five castes because they talk about the untouchables as well. But we have the Brahmins, and they are the priestly caste. We have the Kshatriyas, who are the warriors. We have the Vaishyas, who are the workers or the merchants. And we have the Shudras, who are the servants. And then we have a caste called the untouchables. There are the outcasts. And Gandhi was not happy with referring to them that way and called them instead the Harijans, or the children of God. So he was against the caste system and tried to implement modern India away from the caste system. But the caste system came in with the Aryan period as far as we know. And also with the Aryans, they brought with them their understandings of their gods and goddesses. And a lot of the focus was on fertility, was on having more cattle, was being very successful in this world. And these are what we call life-affirming prayers. It's not so much about the afterlife. It's not about heavens and hells. It's more, what can we do to appease the gods to have prosperity here and now? And this was a long time ago in Indian history. And so when I mentioned Soma, I want you to understand Soma is not something that's advocated in Hinduism at all today. This was way back thousands of years ago. But there was this idea that there were kind of rishis or mystical seers. A rishi is somebody who can see into the heavens, into the transcendental. And these rishis or these seers would possibly take Soma, because Soma is mentioned in a lot of the literature, and would take Soma, which was kind of what you would probably equate it to like a peyote for Native Americans, and kind of a hallucinogenic, which would, having consumed Soma, they would think they were tapping into the realm of the gods and communicating with the gods. And then coming out of that state of ecstasy, they would then articulate their praise and their honor of the gods and goddesses. And so that is very interesting that Soma had played a role at that time period religiously. It's kind of a religious drug, if you want to say it that way. So out of this time period of the Aryans, we also have what is known as the religious literature, and it's the Vedas. The Vedas, we talk about Hindu Vedas. You are a Hindu if you recognize the Vedas. The Hindus, like when we talk about Buddhism, we talk about Jainism, we talk about other religions from India, what makes them outside of the Hindu fold is they do not pay homage to the Vedas as their holy scriptures. So that's what constitutes somebody as a Hindu, as you're recognizing the Vedas. So what it is, it's a collection of their prayers and rituals from this time period. These were orally passed down, then later written down. There are four major parts of the Vedas. We have the Rig Veda, which is praising the gods and goddesses, and it's a lot of it, again, life-affirming prayers. There's like, I think 1,000 plus, 1,028 or something along that, but like 1,000 plus prayers in the Rig Veda to the gods and goddesses. Soma is mentioned there. And we have gods and goddesses that are not honored today in part of Indian philosophy, but kind of outdated gods would be like Indra, the god of war, the god of thunder, or we can have Varuna, the god of cosmic order, or we can have Agni, the god of fire. Again, gods and goddesses that get replaced with new ones later on in a different time period. So we have Sama, which are like, I believe Sama is the songs, and these are prayers, and these are songs, and these are rituals of how to honor the gods and goddesses. And this is more, Atharva Veda is more the medicine, the healing medicines and so forth. So you don't necessarily need to know what each of these stand for, just to know what the Veda stands for and that there are four parts of it. Okay, so moving to the Upanishad period, which is our third period, because I want to try to present this in 30 minutes. The Upanishad period is a period of mysticism. It's a period, a transformation of Hinduism. Like, right, this time period's about gods and goddesses and paying homage to them and praying to them. This time period is not about that at all. It's completely transformation of Indian thought. And it's 2,500 years ago. And a lot of the Indus Valley ideas that we have up here about meditation, because we have the meditating figures and so forth, seem to reemerge. And instead of focusing on the here and the now and what can we garner successfully, but it's more realizing that life is painful and we need to transcend this world and pursue spirituality and meditation. There is a move away from the polytheistic gods of the Aryan period, and now it's moving more towards what's called monism or transtheism. And monism is the idea there's this one higher reality we're all part of, or transtheism is going beyond the gods and goddesses to a transcendental state of consciousness. In this time period, we have the philosophy that Atman is Brahman. It's extremely important to understand that. It's only Atman is Brahman, 3 words, but it really captures the essence of Hinduism. If you understand that, you really get Hinduism. Atman is you, self, and Brahman is the infinite or the divine. Atman is Brahman, Tattavamasi in Sanskrit. And I don't speak Sanskrit. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But that's the idea that thou art, that you are part and parcel of the divine, that you are a drop of the infinite. And Atman is Brahman philosophy comes out of the Upanishad period and is a theme throughout Indian history up to today. When Hindus greet each other, they greet each other with Namaste. And Namaste simply translates as the divinity in me honors and respects the divinity in you. That I bow to the divinity in you is another way to say it. Okay, I respect and honor the divinity of you. And so it's a beautiful way to greet each other. A hello, a goodbye is through a namaste, hands touching together. When you land into Delhi airport in India, and you will see these hands. You will see them as statues throughout the airport. I've seen them on the walls of kind of painted in the Indian airport. You see them throughout India. So it's that namaste hand gesture, but it's very symbolic, very meaningful, acknowledging that Atman is Brahman and I bow to the divinity in you. So it's a beautiful, beautiful reference there. And moving along here to the Upanishad period, we have a lot of the philosophy that enters into Hinduism coming from this time period. So this is where you're going to learn a lot of the terms, and these terms are going to be part of Buddhism and part of Jainism. And so it's not just in Indian Hinduism we find it, but throughout Indian philosophy. And it's the idea of moksha, this idea of samsara, I'll define each of these, this idea of reincarnation, this idea of maya. So let me explain each of those. In the Upanishad time period, they had this idea that we are in this world of birth and death, that we live, we die, and we reincarnate, and we live and we die and reincarnate. So it's this idea of cyclical, and that is called samsara. Samsara is the cycle of birth and death, and then reincarnation is that idea of being reborn into a next life. In Indian philosophy, which was, I think, quite admirable, they do not have the idea of an eternal hell. There may be hellish reincarnations, there may be hellish rebirths, painful ones at that, but at the same time, it's the idea that we're on kind of a progressive learning pattern, and eventually we will attain enlightenment. And it may not happen in your next life, it may not happen in this life, it may happen 10,000 lives from now, but eventually every living being, every existing reality will be liberated. And the idea of liberation is this word here, it's moksha, and moksha is the concept of, it almost sounds like a delicious chocolate coffee drink, like mocha, but it's moksha. And moksha is the word liberation, and it translates as being liberated, being released from that cycle of birth and death, or samsara. Now, why would you want to be released from samsara? I mean, what's wrong with life and life after life? I mean, it sounds, oh, that sounds kind of cool. You never have to worry about death because there's always a rebirth. But it's viewed from Indian philosophy to be a painful life. I mean, life is filled with viruses, life is filled with death, diseases, life is filled with poverty and pain and famine and hunger and tragedy. And so it's the idea that when one attains moksha, how they define it as, and here's the words here I wanted to mention to you, Sat Chitananda, it's pure being, it's pure bliss, it's pure consciousness. You're out of the pain of suffering, you're out of the pain, the reality of, reliving a torturous existence. And so reincarnation is temporary. Eventually, one day you'll be out of that cycle, the argument is. And yoga is a word. It's not just the physical yoga, but it literally means to unite with the divine. The idea that you are the divine, you just have to wake up to it. The illusion or maya is this fact that this world is all that important, or you are the world. Maya is the concept that we're living in this illusion and that we need to wake up and get out of it. And how do you wake up and get out of it? Unite yourself back with the divine through, in Indian philosophy, they have various practices to do that. So I hope I offered some understanding of the Upanishad. Again, mysticism, meditation, waking up to what's important, getting out of the cycle of samsara. Okay, now we're going to get into a period called period 4, or classical Hinduism. And this is about 2,000 years ago. And there's a move to go back to more theistic devotional religion, once again, moving away from that monistic teachings. Yes, the Atman is Brahman philosophy is still there, but also reemerges in this time period, the concepts of different gods and goddesses. And there's different perspectives of those gods and goddesses. Sometimes they're viewed very symbolically, not literally real, and some Hindus will view them as real. It depends upon which orientation you're taking. But 3 very famous gods that come from this time period, and they're called the Trimurti. Tri means 3. It's a Sanskrit word for 3. And Murti is God, so 3 gods. 3 very prevalent ones would be Shiva, and if you're a follower of Shiva, you're a Shaivite. Vishnu's, and if you're a follower of Vishnu, you're a Vaishnava. And Brahma. And Brahma is not as popular of a god today. I don't even have the followers of, because most people fit into these 2 camps. Now, why did Brahma become a little outdated? Well, Brahma is a 4-headed god, I'll show you him. He's right here. This is the 1, 2, 3, 4 heads here. And you'll see statues of him if you go to the British Museum in London of Brahma, because I've been there and seen many statues that came from India. But he's referred to as the creator god, but Shiva takes on the role also as a creator god. And so it kind of seems redundant. The creator god has two of the famous gods are creator gods. So Shiva became a more popular one and Brahma became less so. Anytime you have 4 heads, it's going to represent all knowledge or omniscience. If you're going to have multiple arms, it's all powerful. And so they can do multiple things. So those are deeply symbolic images that you're looking at. And so here we go. Where was I? So Shiva is the god of creation, destruction, dance, and everything. Here's a picture of Shiva as the dancer. So here he's doing Shiva Nataraj. He's doing his famous dance. And his face is very symbolic. So you have to understand this is not necessarily viewed literally. His face is very calm. That's that serenity of meditation. But there's the wild hair and so forth because the chaos of the world. He's doing this dance of creation because he's considered the creator god. His arm is moving down and one moving up. Each of them representing different symbolisms there. I don't have time to go each of those, but he's standing on what looks like this little creature there. And you're like, what is he stomping on that thing? That represents the ego. That represents pain and suffering and illusion. And he's stomping it out. And he's trying to, in the world of chaos, he's trying to find serenity and peace and a meditation. So deeply symbolic imagery here. Moving down, how much time do I have? Not too much. So Shiva, Vishnu, I want to talk about. Vishnu is interesting. He's right here. Okay, I don't have a very large picture of him, but he has a small picture in the middle. And he's got multiple arms. He's spinning this disc here. Very often connected with the lotus flower. But what is so important about Shiva, and such a cool concept, is that it's the idea in Hinduism that at times of trial, at times of tribulation, at times of need, that Vishnu will take on the form of a human being, and that's called an avatar. And the word avatar literally comes from India. Have you heard the word avatar in VR and so forth? What's your avatar? That's an Indian term. And it's the idea of Vishnu taking on human form and coming down to humanity to help out humanity. And so what's neat about that concept is that they'll look at some of the major players in other religions and say, oh, that's an avatar of Vishnu. So they might look, when they learned about Christianity, they looked upon Jesus as an avatar of Vishnu coming out to help out humanity. Or they'll look at Buddha as an avatar of Vishnu coming out to help out humanity. So whatever religious position you have, they can actually incorporate it. It's kind of a piggyback name. They can incorporate it and make it part of their own through that concept of Vishnu. Okay, so here we have Shiva, we have Vishnu, we have Brahma, and these are the Trimurtis. These are the 3 very popular gods throughout Indian history. Again, today it's Shiva and Vishnu mainly, not so much Brahma. The goddesses also merge at this time period. We have Durga, the warrior goddess. We have Kali, the mother, dark mother goddess. She's kind of a gruesome looking mother goddess with like skeletons hanging off her necklace and, sunken in cheekbones and stuff. And it's argued that as the dark mother goddess, the reason she looks so scary is she's trying to wake up her children that this world is Maya, that this world is filled with pain and suffering and death, and that we need to pursue moksha. So it's kind of like the harsh mother's love, or, us. What do you call that? There's a word for it. But this concept of the mother's really trying to do good for us by showing us that the world is filled with so much pain and suffering. Okay, we do have Indus Valley roots here because the mother goddess is also coming back into Indian history with beautiful poetry at this time. Some of the very famous poetry is the Bhagavad Gita. It translates as the Song of the Lord, and it's a chapter out of a much larger book called the Mahabharata. And the Bhagavad Gita is very cool. It's one of the most popular Indian texts in India today because whatever orientation or tradition you have, you can find place in that religious text. What it talks about, there's different yogas to becoming enlightened. So whatever yoga you practice, it talks about different views of God and goddesses, and whatever they have kind of is to lead you to moksha. So it's the idea that however you envision the divine and whatever practice you follow, it helps you get there. It's a conversation really between 2 characters. It's Arjuna, the warrior, and Krishna as chariot driver, who really represent the divine. And it's a conversation between God and the soul. And like Arjuna doesn't want to go live in the world. He doesn't want to go fight the battle, and because he's the warrior, and Krishna is telling him to do his duty, do his dharma or his duty, but always have his mind on God. And so this, beautiful poetry and conversation between really the soul and God. We also have from this time period the laws of Manu, and the reason I'm mentioning that is this is 4,000 years ago. I'm sorry, wrong statement here. 2,000 years ago, and it's a time period where there's a text that comes out, really explains there's 4 stages of life, there's 4 goals of life, there's 4 yogas of life, and I'm going to walk you through these really quickly. The 4 stages of life that the ideal stages. Again, you don't have to go through all 4 of those stages, and sometimes people become a student and skip to an ascetic. Become a mystic at the age of 16. But a traditional Hindu person, namely a male at this time, because it's a little more male-oriented 2,000 years ago, would be a student, and then that person would be a householder and have a family and a career, and then a forest dweller. They go off and kind of retreat and meditate when they enter into retirement years, and then when they're very old, they become an ascetic and they give up everything of the world and just totally concentrate on moksha. So those are the 4 stages. Ideal. Again, it doesn't have to be followed. It's not strict. It's just that those are, the ideal. If everybody went from student to ascetic, we wouldn't have merchants and we wouldn't have, places to get food because everybody'd skip that, career area. So it's a good thing to have all 4, they argue. The 4 goals is it's okay to have all 4 of these goals. Do your social duty or your obligation or your dharma. Have a career, artha, have a career, have a family, have a bank account, that's fine. Kama is love, aesthetic and erotic. It's okay to have the romance and all of that. Kama Sutras, I'm sure you've heard about, comes from India. Kama Sutra is the book of love. I won't go into more detail on that one. You may have a copy at home. Moksha is the liberation from samsara. So don't just have these 3 all deal with the world, but the 4th one is the spiritual goal. And I said that's extremely important. And then there's 4 yogas are found in the Bhagavad Gita. Again, yoga is to unite you to the divine. There's 4 ways to do that. One is through bhakti, which is devotion. One is through karma yoga, which is the yoga of action. And this is an interesting one. This is arguing that when you act in the world, don't act for any reward. Act for the act of the action itself, and always do so with your mind on the divine. It's to honor the divine. It's not, for instance, you are helping somebody not to get kudos from that person or not to get brownie points from somebody, or you're in a class not to get the letter grade A. You're just doing it for, it's the right thing to do, and it's in honor of the divine. So karma yoga is all of your actions are pinpointed and concentrated on doing it for its own sake and with the spiritual purpose in mind, not with the material purpose in mind. And jnana yoga is the yoga of knowledge. It's studying the scriptures and seeking self-awareness through studying the Vedas and so forth. And the Raja yoga is the yoga of meditation. And how does one meditate? Well, around 2,000 years ago, there was a book written, Yoga Sutras, by Patanjali, but he explains these 8 steps how to meditate, and it's having an externally cleaning. Okay, that's the bathing. It's internally with your diet. It's being ethical. It's engaging in the physical form of yoga, which is the yoga. If you take a yoga class at Mount Sac or in a yoga studio, that's hatha yoga. It's just one of the stages. Breath control is pranayama yoga. And it's that you learn a lot of pranayama yoga in a yoga class as well. Withdrawing your senses at the 3rd eye, concentrating at the 3rd eye, and then, possibly through a mantra or what have you, and trying to experience a transcendental state through the 3rd eye. And then samadhi is when one has attained that moksha state. Now, moving into the next time period, let's push through 2 more and we're done here, is the medieval time period. And this is a time period, the medieval period, they always talk about the medieval as about 1,000-year time period. And this is when we have a lot of the Vedanta teachers come into existence, and we have 3 very well-known teachers here, and they're in your reading. One is Shankara, he's the 9th century, Ramanuja is the 11th century, and Madhva is the 13th century. So here we have Shankara. Some people say Shankara, some people say Shankara, so I kind of might go in and out of that. But he taught a non-dualistic monistic philosophy that Atman is Brahman. We've already heard that before, but he's the one that repopularized it. He brought it back. He said, look, this is the focus of our Hindu teachings. This is the focus. This is what our goal should be, is realizing that Atman is Brahman, realizing this world is filled with Maya. We are not separate. Dualism is a separation. We are not separate from the divine. And he envisioned God as Nirguna, or formless. There is this infinite, formless, higher existence of which we're all part of. We're not even part of it. It is just one, because part of sounds like there's the part and the whole. There is just the whole. Now we have Ramanuja coming along, and he argued for, yes, there is this non-dualism. Yes, we're all part, Atman is Brahman, but the part and the whole aren't necessarily equal. And it's an equivalent example would be like if you're at the beach and you see all the grains of sand, each grain of sand is part of the sand, but it's not the sum total of the sand. So the analogy would allow for a lot of, or I'm sorry, that understanding would allow for a lot of bhakti. It would allow for a lot of devotion because the part can intuit there's something greater than itself and intuit that there's room for honor and paying homage to something greater than yourself. You're part of, but you're not the sum total of. Where in Shankara, it talks about is just like the ocean. There is no separation of little drops. They're all is just one big drop, the ocean itself. Okay. And Madhva is more of a dualistic theistic approach and definitely bhakti oriented, and it's that separation of self from the divine. So Atman Brahman philosophy isn't interpreted the same way that Shankara and Ramanuja interpret it. It's not Atman is Brahman. It's like we are like Brahman, but we are not the sum total of, or we're not equal to. And it's definitely that sense of separation. I feel like it fits a lot more with the Western mentality, the Western paradigm of you are not God, because that would be kind of sacrilegious to say that in the West. And so it's the idea that you are God-like or you have God-like characteristics, but you are not. And so that would be kind of a Madhva interpretation. And Madhva honors, for instance, the concept of Krishna. There's followers today of Indian philosophy in America called the Hare Krishnas. We call them the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, or ISKCON. And they follow Madhva's philosophy of that dualism theism approach. Okay, then we have in the medieval period the Islamic influence, and Islam enters into India around the 1100s and really is strong also during the Mughal Empire, which starts in the 1500s. And a lot of Islamic influence is certainly entering into India through architecture, through a lot of, the beautiful buildings that we have in India with the minarets. Even some of the philosophy influences India, definitely. So that's kind of something to mention there. And then we move into the modern time period. And the modern time period we really started in the 1800s with the British, or 1700s or 18th century with the British entering into India. And a lot of reform movements happen. Now that the British enters India, so does Christianity enter India. And a lot of reform movements spring up in reaction to that. Some of them like work with the Christian missionaries and incorporate Christian ideas into Hinduism and kind of rethink of, for instance, they may rethink the caste system. Oh, we don't like the caste system because we see it now from the Christian perspective, or, oh, we change our perspective on this and that. And some of the movements are more to challenge the Christian missionaries coming in saying, hey, you're entering into our soil and we have a really rich, beautiful tradition in and of ourselves, and kind of challenging the Christian missionaries. So some reform movements happen in India. We have some famous Indian teachers coming, like the 19th century Ramakrishna. He taught all religions lead you to God. His student Vivekananda came to America and set up the Vedanta temples in America. There's one in North Hollywood in Southern California. And it's actually a very beautiful tradition, focusing on all religions lead you to enlightenment. And Yogananda came to America, Self-Realization Fellowship he set up in Southern California in the 1920s, and they're all over the place. Fullerton has one, Santa Monica has one, Encinitas has one. And so what do I want to say here? Many gurus for India. Okay, so there's the idea, there's also female gurus, and we always start talking about these males here, but there's also female gurus. There's one called Amma, the hugging guru. And there's the idea, the role of the female in Indian philosophy is very interesting, because in some ways you think, well, it's a lot of male oriented because it's talking about the stages for the males and the goals for the males. But the role of female is quite significant, because the minute you have the female described as the goddess, it empowers that sense of what a female is. And I mean, you're describing the divine and female form, it's going to change your whole perspective of the female. So there's kind of a mixed bag of how the female is understood in Indian philosophy. In some ways, didn't play a significant role as the male, but in other ways plays a very significant role than other religions would have the female play. And even the concept that the female can become enlightened and become a guru herself is very empowering. And then in India today, the caste system is not necessarily honored at the political level, but is certainly at the family level and the social level. Marriages are arranged with the caste system. It's still part of how they see the world. It's ingrained in them for the thousands of years. And then sati is also outlawed in India, and that's where when the wife, her husband passed away, and they're cremating him, because in India, if for Hinduism, you always cremate, in Islam, you always bury, but in Hinduism, you cremate. And the wife used to throw herself on the funeral pyre and die with her husband, which was so tragic. And so that is considered outlawed in India today. And the British put a stop to that, let's just say. So I whipped you through, I think 35 minutes here, but the required reading, there's the main Hindu article, and then there's the 9 myths of Hinduism debunked, and people like this one, because it just talks about, what does that dot on the forehead mean, and how do they view cows? No, they do not worship the cow. Okay, they honor the cow as the holy mother that feeds her children. Are all Hindus vegetarian? Not at all. There's, how many Hindus are there in the world? I forgot to mention, they're over 1 billion, but in India, there's a little less than 1 billion Hindus in India. It's about 80% of the population in India, and about 30% of them are vegetarian. And so about 30% do not eat meat, is what it's saying. So there's a lot of Hindus that do eat meat. And so that's kind of interesting to know, because there's just a lot of misnomers, a lot of mistakes in understanding Hinduism, and that article is correcting that. And there's supplemental reading here. And what else do I offer? So I have Hindu literature available to you. I have the Bhagavad Gita available to you. I have the Upanishads available to you. If you were to read that literature and pursue a post on that, that could be extra credit for you. I have your post questions. I think I give you 2 for this week, not 2 to do, I'm sorry, but 2 options. So you hear the main one, and most of you will do that. But if you thought, oh, that literature sounds fantastic, I want to read it, here you can click on that, and then there's other, I have music to go with it and all that cool stuff. I have a meditation post if you wanted to practice those 8 steps, okay? And I give you an article explaining how to meditate, so you would actually have to read that as well. Okay, you guys, I'm going to end this presentation finally, okay, after 30-some minutes, and I want to say namaste. I bow to the divine in you. Here we go, stop share. I'm sorry that was so fast, but I hope you learned something. Okay, bye-bye, everyone.